Next slide, please. Thank you, Jack, for that introduction, and thanks to the European Commission for organizing this event, which we're very much looking forward to. When Jack mentioned the approach taken by the coalition, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about how the coalition considers both climate and clean air simultaneously and why that's important. To give you a little bit of background, if I could have the next slide, please. The Climate and Clean Air Coalition has been around since 2012 and targets short-lived climate pollutants. You can see some of those on the screen now. They are methane, hydrofluorocarbons, black carbon are the main pollutants of interest, and these are all pollutants that last around a decade or less in the atmosphere. That means they give us, reducing them gives us a powerful way to get a very rapid change in climate. They do not substitute for controlling long-lived carbon dioxide, but complement it by providing relief from increasing damages due to accelerating climate change very rapidly in the near term. Not only that, but the black carbon and methane also contribute to air pollution. So we get both benefits for climate in the near term as well as the long term, of course. We also get benefits for air quality. These affect public health. They also affect our crops and our forests. So they affect ecosystems as well. Ozone in particular near the surface of the earth is toxic to both people and to ecosystems. How this links to development is that the measures to control these pollutants lead to development benefits. For example, reducing emissions of methane that come from the waste sector, from landfills, or from the fossil fuel sector, from leaky pipelines and storage systems. These give you captured methane, the main component of natural gas, which can then be used to provide power. Things like inspecting pipeline systems and finding the leaks create jobs. Things like switching from traditional biofuel cook stoves, which are one of the main sources of black carbon emissions, to modern forms of energy access are, of course, part of the story of development, providing access to modern forms of energy, preventing women from having to spend their time gathering wood, which of course has a contribution to deforestation and carbon dioxide. So clean cooking, management of rice cultivation so as to intermittently flood rice paddies can lead to better yields for farmers, as well as reducing methane emissions. So we've got a whole slew of existing technologies. We're not waiting for technology to come and save us. The technology is here. We're talking about things like cook stoves, clean diesel vehicles, etc. What the CCAC does is bring expertise in SLCP, short-lived climate pollutant solutions, and we provide advice to governments to help their national planning and enable them to focus on reducing short-lived climate pollutants, contributing to mitigating climate change while also contributing to their public health goals. So today we're going to hear from multiple panelists explaining why that work is important in different parts of the world. We're going to start with an example from Central America, then move to the Maldives, and finally to Nigeria. But first, I would like to hear from everybody watching today through a short poll. If we could have that poll, please, brought to the screen to see what you think the climate and air quality priority sectors are in Central America. There you can see the poll there. To respond, open www.sli.do, Slido, in your browser, enter the session code on the screen, and also remember that you can ask us questions using the Q&A feature on Slido, and these questions we'll try to address at the end during the Q&A period. While you're answering the poll, I want to introduce our first speaker, Graciela Raga. Graciela is a professor in Atmospheric Science Department in the National Autonomous University of Mexico and also a member of the CCAC Scientific Advisory Panel. She's done extensive work in Central America, providing scientific background at high-level events regarding climate and air quality. So Graciela, the first question for you. From your work in Central America and engaging with the CCAC, what do you see as the main benefits of an integrated approach for climate and clean air? Next slide, please, and over to you, Graciela.
Thank you, Drew, and hello, everybody. First, let me mention that countries in Central America are highly vulnerable to climate impacts that are already appearing and that are projected for the coming decades. In particular, the region is very vulnerable to extreme weather events, such as the major hurricanes that recently caused loss of life and infrastructure. Also, Central America heavily depends on rainfall for agriculture and for power generation. So changes in the beginning of the rainy season or in the spatial distribution of rainfall can lead to issues in food security, given the large fraction of rural population that relies on subsistence agriculture. There are several air pollution sources in Central America. I don't know if we have to wait for the poll results, but I can start talking. There are mainly two sectors that dominate the black carbon emissions, the transportation and the residential cook stove. The transportation is associated with heavy-duty vehicles that burn a very low-quality diesel. So the CCAC has been involved in several activities in the whole Latin American region to identify solutions to some of the more pressing air quality problems. In terms of the, for example, the cook stoves, the residential emissions, the work in conjunction with the Clean Cooking Alliance helped to develop strategies for cook stove standards. Such strategies are very important to be implemented and require a strong political will from the individual countries, institutional resources, and a legal framework, which then you can imagine takes some time to yield tangible resources. Another example, the CCAC supported the transition towards reduced use of firewood in indigenous and rural areas, for example, in Guatemala. So trying to move away from the really dirty cook stoves is an important component. An additional source is the open burning associated with agricultural activities. And it's a large contributor of both black carbon emissions and other gases that are precursors to ozone. And it's often related to cultural practices deeply entrenched in the communities, and it's somewhat difficult to stop. The CCAC is involved also in training and facilitating the development of national action plans to reduce these short-lived climate pollutants in several countries of Latin America, not only Central America. And for example, it has interacted with the Parliamentary Confederation of Latin America, which ratified a declaration on SLCPs in 2018, recommending urgent mitigation of those pollutants to member states. So that gives you an idea of what the CCAC is doing in the region in terms of these to further actions and improve and achieve benefits that are in the local air quality and have implications for climate mitigation as well.
Thank you, Graciela. That's a fascinating perspective on the political parliamentary outreach and as well as learning about the agriculture and cook stoves. So I'd like to introduce our next two speakers, and as Maiha HAMEED from the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Technology in the Maldives, and Bala BAPPA from the Ministry of the Environment in Nigeria. Thanks for both of you for joining us today. The first question to both of you then is the Maldives and Nigeria have both received CCAC policy and planning support for their national policies related to SLCPs. Can you tell us a bit about why the support was needed and what it looked like? Next slide, please, and over to you first, Maiha.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you to the organizers for this opportunity. The Maldives is a small island developing state, or with only 1% of the country, large state, and it makes us particularly vulnerable to climate impacts such as extreme weather events. When the Maldives first joined the CCAC, there was a growing concern on urban air quality in the capital island of Malé. Malé has a population density of almost 80,000 people per square kilometer. And while they had an idea of the major sources of pollutants, since greenhouse gases or GHGs were inventoried, we had no estimates of air pollutants. So for instance, we did not know how much black carbon was being emitted from the transport sector or so forth. But we had limited capacity in place to manage air quality, especially at the time. And that's when we requested for CCAC policy and planning support, which took place in 2 phases. The first phase focused on institutional strengthening, and by the end of it, the ministry had established its first unit and permanent staff dedicated towards air quality management. This was an important step in laying the groundwork as we went forward. During the second phase of the support, CCAC and the Stockholm Environment Institute, or the SCI, assisted us in developing our first air pollutant emission inventory using their modeling tool LEAP, or the Low Emissions Analysis Platform. This was the first time that we had estimated baseline air pollutants for sectors, and we incorporated this process within the ministry team who were already involved in developing the biennial update report inventory, so that the air pollutant inventory would be developed in harmony with the GHG inventory, which would also make the process of updating and maintaining the inventory more sustainable and effective. SCI also assisted us to estimate the reductions in air pollution for the GHG mitigation measures included in our nationally determined contributions, or the NDC, which are our national climate commitments for the UNFCCC. This undertaking resulted in our first national action plan on air pollutants. Thank you.
Thank you, Maiha. Over to you, Bala, for your experience from Nigeria, please.
Thank you, Drew. For Nigeria, we have been partners of the CCAC since 2012, and because of the human impacts of high level of indoor and outdoor pollution, we approached the CCAC to support us towards improving the air quality problems in Nigeria, especially as it affects the rural women who are mostly using fuel woods as a form of energy. So the Secretariat supported Nigeria to develop a national action plan to reduce short-lived climate pollutants, which include black carbon, methane, troposphere, ozone, and the HFCs. So that action plan was developed in collaboration with all stakeholders, including ministries, departments, and agencies, and also development partners. So the action plan was endorsed by the Federal Executive Council, headed by the President, and it's now currently being implemented. And we made sure that the recommendations were mainstreamed into the national development process. And we have an ongoing development plan, which is the National Sustainable Development Program, which will run between 2021 to 2025. And we're also working with the Stockholm Environment Institute to revise our NDCs and make sure that the recommendations of the mitigation measures are included in the revised NDC of Nigeria. And the CCAC has continued to support us after the endorsement of the plan with the implementation process, especially on the tracking and monitoring of the implementation. And we are also working with cross-cutting departments like the Ministry of Health for the campaigns and to address the health impacts of the air pollution. We are also working with the Ministry of Finance, Budget, and National Planning to include SLCP projects in the national budgets for execution by the the ministries, departments, and agencies. So the National Action Plan that has been endorsed is currently under implementation and has been mainstreamed in the national development process, as well as the NDC revision that is currently going on with the help of Stockholm Environment Institute. And the Stockholm Environment Institute is also working closely with Nigeria to develop capacities in the use of the IBC towards greenhouse gas inventory analysis and modeling. Thank you.
Thank you, Bala and Maya. Very interesting to hear about the experiences in three very different parts of the world from all three of our panelists so far. So before we go back to Maya, who'll get the next question, I'd like to poll the audience with a question regarding the Maldives. So if we could have the next slide and the poll up, please. The question here is, what is the Maldives' contribution to global climate emissions? To respond again, open www.sli.do in your browser, enter the session code on the screen, and remember, again, you can ask questions. You can see that the contribution is a small number, but just how small is it? I'd be interested to hear what you think. Maya, meanwhile, while we wait for the poll to come in, what have been some of the benefits for you of CCAC's work with the Maldives? You mentioned that the work has been integrated into the development plan for your country. What are the benefits specifically for development?
Thank you, Professor. Well, the development of this of our air pollutant action plan was timely because it came at a moment when our new administration was developing a 5-year development agenda for the Strategic Action Plan 2019 to 2023, or the SAP. Due to our exercises as part of our CCAC projects, we were able to incorporate components of the air pollutant action plan, such as developing emission standards and real-time air quality monitoring and awareness into the SAP. The SAP is this government's central policy framework and planning document, and it guides the overall development direction of the Maldives until 2023. So there's a very high priority to nationally fund actions included within it. Some components of the plan has already been included in the National COVID Recovery and Resilience Plan as well. So we were able to bring about our goal of promoting short-lived climate pollutant mitigation at a national level by integrating SLCPs into the most relevant national planning and decision-making framework. So for the Maldives, CCAC's financial and technical assistance has getting involved with the CCAC strengthened our case to highlight and SLCP measures in our national policies. It increased our own political awareness on the coherent nature of air quality and climate issues, on the interlinkage of air quality to human health and the development agenda. Professor, should I say the answer?
Thank you, Maya. The answer, yes, please.
Okay, our contribution to global climate emissions is 0.003%. Thank you to all who voted. Thank you, Professor.
Good voting, 71%. That's excellent. So let's try this again. The poll's kind of fun. We have another question for the audience before we turn back to Bala. And so the question this time will be related to Nigeria. In Nigeria, how many annual premature deaths per year can be avoided by implementing solutions that mitigate short-lived climate pollutants? So if we could have that poll, there we go. So please go ahead and enter your answers again. Meanwhile, we'll start the next question to you, Bala. What are the benefits of CCAC's integrated approach in Nigeria, and how have measures to reduce SLCPs been built into your COVID-19 recovery plans? Bala, are you connected? We may have lost Bala for a moment. Okay, so let us, we'll have to I can tell you at least the answer to the poll question. Nigerian citizens could have a reduction by targeting measures to reduce short-lived climate pollutants of between 5 and 10,000 avoided premature deaths annually. So very large impacts available to Nigeria. Their action plan identified, there we go, actually, a very well executed poll, a very good voting for the participants. Their national action plan has priority measures that are designed to bring these kind of benefits to the people of Nigeria by having worked with LEAP IBC and the CCAC to identify the kind of measures that would both be most effective in mitigating climate change and cleaning up the air. So that's my impromptu summary of what I expect Bala would likely have said, and we're going to then turn back to Graciela. And so, Graciela, we've heard about how the CCAC supports countries to take national action. How do the regional assessments that are another thing that CCAC has sponsored and produced, how do those complement the support provided at the national level?
Yes, thank you, Drew. Regional integrated assessments can provide targeted insight on the specific needs of a region or individual countries and can guide countries to prioritize their mitigation actions. In particular, the regional assessment for Latin America and the Caribbean that was carried out as a CCAC initiative provided a picture of emissions per sectors for the whole Latin American and Caribbean region, allowing for a comparison of the contributions of those sectors in the different countries with the 2010 baseline that was provided for all countries. While many countries in the region face similar socioeconomic inequalities and climate impacts, they often have a very different sectorial emissions, which require a different mix of actions to maximize the potential benefits to improve air quality and reduce their overall climate warming footprint. We already mentioned cook stoves earlier, but the region also includes several urban centers in which the contribution of the transport sector is very important. Central America has a range of fuel standards, with some very dirty diesel being used in very old heavy-duty vehicles. So moreover, the import and sale of all vehicles, what we call super emitters, combine obsolete technologies and dirty fuel and can result in extremely large emissions. The regional assessment in Latin America and the Caribbean identified some mitigation options that would be optimal for Central America, such as the switches towards cleaner cook stoves that we mentioned earlier, the elimination of super emitters, a switch to cleaner diesel fuel, and a ban on the agricultural open air burning could lead up to 89% reduction in black carbon emissions and lead to significant reduction in premature deaths by 2050. In addition, if countries in Central America would also implement a few measures to mitigate methane emissions from solid and liquid waste treatment, it would prevent air quality degradation and further reduce health risks due to ambient ozone, which is also a risk for crops. So to implement targeted actions identified in the regional assessment, countries in Central America specifically, but also around the world, can seek further support from the CCAC to obtain maximum benefits at country level. The CCAC has the experience and can foster a collaborative environment where national governments can work together to improve air quality of their entire region by contributing to the overall reductions of emissions that result in climate warming. Back to you, Drew.
Thank you, Graciela, as well as our other panelists. Oh, and it's good to see you back, Bala. Thank you all three of you, for providing your insights on the importance of taking action to mitigate short-lived climate pollutants and providing us some nice examples of how this can be done in different developing countries and how there are similarities, but also some distinct differences across the regions. As discussed here today, CCAC's integrated multiple benefits approach reduces SLCP emissions, and simultaneously that limits their climate change impacts while also maximizing real-world benefits, such as avoided premature deaths and other human health concerns linked to SLCPs, and improved agricultural yield, primarily by reducing surface ozone levels. And these are all done through effective and efficient programs and activities. We heard from Graciela about CCAC's support of the Latin American and Caribbean Regional Assessment just now. And currently, the CCAC is undertaking a new Africa assessment, launched last year, to work with African stakeholders on an integrated assessment aimed to determine how to balance African priority development efforts with efforts to limit short-lived climate pollutant and improve the environment, all while understanding and providing a roadmap of quantifying mitigation options that are consistent with African development goals. The CCAC is also moving forward with an ambitious 2030 agenda of the partner, focused on driving forward national action and ambition. We are currently supporting developing countries that are at various stages of the planning process and helping them to identify targets, both for hydrofluorocarbons, for methane, and for black carbon. More countries can benefit from that support. So we have just a few minutes left here in our session. What I'm going to do in a moment is take the time to answer questions from the Q&A, which for me is on a different screen. But while I switch to that screen, I'm just going to turn the floor briefly back to you, Bala, if you wanted to add anything when we missed your chance to weigh in when I had asked you about the benefits for Nigeria.
Thank you, Prof. I apologize, I'm having internet challenges here. So, but as earlier said, the endorsed National Action Plan that is currently under implementation identified 22 mitigation measures, which, if implemented, will result into 83% reduction in black carbon, 61% reduction in methane, and 22% reduction in exposure to air pollution by 2030 in comparison to business as usual. And to work with the ministries, departments, agencies, and other stakeholders, as well as the CCAC Secretariat in the implementation. And we have identified some priority areas to include increasing population using modern fuels, cooking fuels, including expansion of the, especially to the rural areas, the use of solar and biogas and the LPG. We've also identified a reduction of emissions from enteric methane with the Ministry of them to improve animal health and husbandry. And also livestock and manure management, and using it for the biogas project. In cleaner fuels, as mentioned in Mexico, to engage the Ministry of Petroleum, Ministry of Transport, and refine cleaner fuels with less sulfur. We are also working with elimination of gas flaring and also using the gas to supply energy, and we are reduction of methane leakages. So just to rush, during the pandemic, which has slowed down, the government has also, carried out some activities, including $63 million US dollars that is used for solar power to million households with energy while giving about 250,000 jobs. We are also, the federal government has also using the about 236 million US dollars to promote domestic use of compressed natural and natural gas, CNG, for use in form of energy and also for transport. So these are some of the efforts that the government is doing to reduce mitigation in the country. Sorry, I have to rush because I know we are very conscious of time. Thank you, Drew.
Oh, thank you, Bala. I'm glad you were able to rejoin us. And in fact, what you were just talking about, some of the clear examples in Nigeria are an excellent segue to the questions as well. The first question, which was on the screen there for a moment, was what are some of the quantifiable benefits that are achieved from in countries where the CCAC has provided assistance? And so you were just talking about the jobs produced in Nigeria. You're talking about the methane that's captured and then provides an energy source. I'd like to just open this up if any of the three of you would like to provide some further examples, the quantifiable benefits that you have seen in your countries or regions of where you work following CCAC support.
Okay, well, I can jump in. Also, the regional assessment has determined what are the main sources of methane in the region, and the reduction of methane in the different regions and countries of Central America are obviously very different. As you know, agriculture is a very large sector that is kind of difficult to mitigate. So there is much more potential in as you were mentioning earlier, the oil and gas industry in several of the countries like Mexico, like Venezuela, like Brazil, Colombia, certain that have large mining and petroleum industries, checking for leaks in the pipelines. It's a win-win situation given the fact that you recover the gas that is not vented to the atmosphere, and you can use it as a source of fuel energy to fuel some other cleaner, for example, cook stoves, or as they were mentioning also in Nigeria.
Great, thank you, Graciela. I see that we have a couple other questions too. One of them I think I can give a very quick answer to, and then I'll turn back to the panel with the next. Someone has asked about, yes, whether the CCAC has done other regional assessments. Are there plans to do more in the future? The answer to that is the CCAC has done a regional assessment for Latin America and the Caribbean, which Graciela talked about. And as I mentioned, there is an ongoing one currently for Africa. The other one that's completed is for Asia, and we called that the Asian Solutions Report. All of these, well, the ones that are already completed for Latin America and for Asia are available from CCAC at the CCAC website. That's the extent of the plans presently, is to complement Latin America and Asia with the analysis of Africa. Now, there was another question specifically about development, and maybe we can pass this one over to, since Graciela kindly jumped in on the last one, to Maiha or Bala, which is really how can the development community bring, okay, there's even more. There we go. There's a lot of questions. Wonderful. So what can people working in development do to bring, how can they help with the process? There's also a question on the screen now. How can governments get started with this approach. So maybe Maiha, if you want to weigh in on those two, what can development bring and how can governments get started? And then Bala.
Well, yes, thank you, Professor. Well, I think it would be helpful to CCAC for the support on policy and planning, on SLCPs, where it was extremely beneficial for the Maldives. It took us through step by step. We worked from ground up in trying to strengthen capacity, institutional strengthening on short-lived climate pollutants. There were major stakeholder meetings and a lot of awareness going on. Well, yes, I think it would be good for the governments to approach CCAC for SNAP support.
Excellent, thank you, Maiha. Bala, would you like to make a comment too? What can governments do, and how can the development community help?
Sorry, it's vibrating. I didn't hear the question, and it's still vibrating.
Okay, well, one way clearly that governments can get involved is to contact the CCAC. And if you are from a partner country, there are more than 70 countries in the coalition, then you will have a focal point within your country who can help. And if not, that's okay too. The CCAC is happy under the National Action Planning support portion of the coalition to support countries that are non-members as well. And so we've heard things about the LEAP, long-range energy and planning tool. We are happy to provide training in using that tool and provide the tool itself to countries who are interested in getting involved. Countries just have to reach out to us. And in fact, that's really what I would encourage everybody to do. So I would like to really take this opportunity here at the closing to thank everybody who participated today, and to note that really if you are interested in learning more about our work, getting involved from the development side or from the government side, then contact the CCAC, contact us to request support. We're happy to support countries who have not been a part of this before, as well as continue to support our existing partners. If you're from a non-governmental organization or the development community, again, please contact us and find out how we can help you by providing examples that can be replicated. We can show you where our approach has worked, how we fit it into the climate and development agenda, into the planning support mechanisms, places where anaerobic digesters and clean cook stoves and methane capture systems have been deployed. We can give you examples of how that works. Finally, we also provide funding. The CCAC is supported by the partner countries, and many of those have made donations that can provide, that's one of the obvious answers to how the development community can help, is provide funding to implement projects in developing countries. The CCAC is also a source of funding. So contact us if we can provide support for national planning, for implementing policies and practices, effective projects to reduce SLCPs on the ground, or to request funding yourself for a project that is related to short-lived climate pollutants. I want to thank all of our panelists again, Graciela, Maiha, Bala. It's been a pleasure. It's been an interesting discussion. I'm glad the technology largely worked very well. And with that, I believe we are finished. Thank you all for joining us, and ccaccoalition.org. Please reach out.
Thank you so much, Drew, for that session. That was a really, really interesting session. They talked about, the technology that was already there. It was already present, that needs to just be implemented. We're ready to support these developing countries to do what needs to be done. I think it was really interesting, some of the quiz segments there within that panel were really fun and interesting, where it was sort of get the answer right. For instance, how much does the Maldives contribute to global emissions, that being 0.003%. Gladly, when I took part in the poll, I managed to get it right. I did think the other option was 0.00003, and it wasn't. And also this idea of the lives being saved, and the suggestion that clean air can save, 5 to 10,000 lives in Nigeria if all of these are implemented. There were some really interesting parts of this panel, and I'd like to thank all the speakers and the guests and Andrew for moderating that panel. We will be back here in the pollution and chemicals studio. We're going to have our stand-up interview about localized action and people getting involved in climate action. That will start at 10 past the hour. So take a little break. If you need to go and grab yourself a coffee, you can. And we'll start that interview at 10 past here in Studio 4 at the European Development Days.